Hello, everybody. Welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we will critically analyze W.B. Yeats's Easter 1916. We will examine the historical context of this poem as well as some of its major themes. So let's get started with the analysis. The Irish poet W.B. Yeats wrote Easter 1916 to remember the Easter Rising in 1916, when Irish nationalists led a revolt to get freedom from British rule. In the end, the leaders of the rising were executed, and Yeats's poem uh, praises the rebels' bravery and devotion. At the same time, it's also to some extent critical of the revolt and its extreme politics. Let me just give you a very brief account of the historical context of the poem now. The Easter Rising was an armed uprising in Ireland during the Easter week in April 1916. In 1916, Irish Republicans rose up against British rule in Ireland. They wanted to make Ireland an independent republic. It was the first armed battle of the Irish Revolution. Starting in May 1916, 16 of the leaders of the rising were executed. What happened during the executions and what happened in politics afterwards eventually made more people want Ireland to be independent. The rising started on Easter Monday, April 24th, 1916, and went on for 6 days. It was planned by a seven-person military council of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. The Irish volunteers, led by the schoolteacher and Irish language activist Patrick Pearse, who was mentioned in the poem, took over strategically important buildings in Dublin and declared the Irish Republic. They were joined by James Connolly's smaller Irish citizen army. James Connolly is also mentioned in the poem, and 200 women from an Irish Republican women's paramilitary group. The women are not mentioned in the poem at all. Um, The British Army put down the rising with a lot more soldiers and heavier weapons. Pierce agreed to give up without conditions on April 29th. The country stayed under martial rule after the surrender. The British captured about 3,500 people and sent 1,800 of them to jails and internment camps in Britain. Most of the leaders of the rising were put to death after being found guilty by court martial. People's views changed in response to the British um, response to the rising, which helps the movement towards independence. For example, the Sinn Féin, that is the first Irish political party, won the Irish election in December 1918 and called for the first Dáil, which declared independence. Let's look at some of the important themes in the um, in the poem. And at the heart of Eastern 1916 is the theme of sacrifice. The poem contemplates how individual sacrifices can give rise to a collective awakening and redefine national identity. Leaders like Pearse, MacDonagh, and Connolly, initially ordinary individuals, become martyrs whose sacrifice elevate them to iconic status. The phrase "a terrible beauty is born" captures the paradoxical nature of the rising, signifying the birth of a new, albeit unsettling, reality for Ireland. And woven into the fabric of the poem is the theme of cyclical recurrence and inevitability. Yeats reflects on the historical pattern of Irish uprisings, emphasizing the repetition in the opening and the closing lines. Through the lines, all changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. This cyclical pattern suggests that while specific events may change, the underlying struggle for independence and sacrifices may remain constant in Irish history. The poem also navigates the intersection of the personal and the political, blurring the line between private life and public upheavals. by mentioning individuals like Pierce and MacDonough, whom Yeats knew personally. The poem emphasizes how the ordinary lives of these figures were drawn into the currents of of historical events. And the poem is also, although the poem praises the sacrifices of the rebels, it's also very critical of nationalism, especially um, uh, the very violent, uh, maybe iteration of nationalism. So if you look, I have selected a couple of lines from the poem, and where the poet expresses a certain kind of um, skepticism about the revolt. Of course, uh, he respects and honors the sacrifices made by the leaders of the rebellion, but he is also skeptical. He asks whether it was truly very necessary. So, in this poem, which when we read, it's very easy to think that this poem is just a tribute to the fallen heroes of the Easter Rising of 1916. But when you look at it a little closely, it's also criticism of nationalism, and it's a very mild, it's a very soft criticism, but it's definitely there. And you can see the lines on the slides given here, where the poet, the speaker of the poem, asks whether it was necessary and when will it be enough? When will the sacrifices be enough? And I find that line to be almost prophetic, because a few decades after this, the island was the country was rocked by what is today referred to as the Troubles. So, in conclusion, Easter 1916 emerges as a very poignant exploration of Irish history, navigating the complexities of sacrifice, of cyclical recurrence, and the convergence of personal and political realms. Yeats's poetic mastery delves into the very heart of this historical event, offering profound insights into the transformative power of historical events and their enduring impact, particularly the enduring impact in this case of Easter 1916 on Irish collective consciousness and their national identity. Thank you.